Hi, okay, so I had a couple of questions from people. They want to know if I would sharpen tweezers for them. So rather than have you actually drive over here, figure this out, I'll just rather show you per video, and it's pretty easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of skill. Any place along your local hardware stores, big box stores, whatever, will have different grades of wet and dry sandpapers. These happen to be 1,000, 1,500, and 2,000. Generally speaking, chef knives are around the 1,000 grit when they're doing a finishing stone. Japanese knives might be in the 1,500 range if the person is really good knowing what they're doing. 2,000 would probably be something in the surgical area that we wouldn't really deal with, but these are all good for polishing metals at the end of sharpening processes as well. So before the video started here, what I did was, if you can see, I painted them red using a Sharpie permanent marker. And you can see that I did both sides. And what that's gonna do is tell us how these tweezers track. So I'm gonna take one piece of the 1,000 grit, because it's the most coarse paper that we have here for the demonstration. I'm gonna fold it in half. And I'm going to make sure it's lined up right, so it's nice and even, because we're doing a test here. And what I'm gonna do is, you're gonna take the surface of the tweezers that you painted with the red, with the Sharpie marker, the ink of your color choice, and you're gonna put it on here, all the way up to the end of the tweezer, where the tweezer can no longer reach. At that point, you're gonna grab them where you would generally use them, where you're comfortable holding them, and you're gonna do one straight draw back without overexerting the pressure. Almost like you were holding them regular, right? So, literally that's it. You can see we left a little bit of red behind, and then it kind of lightened up from there. So let's see what we got. So if you look inside here, you can see there's leftover red. There's leftover red. The tip on this side, as you can see, is not making contact with the tip on that side. That's why there's red left behind. So that's gonna tell you where to work. So this is our second set that we're gonna do that I showed you earlier, painted with the red Sharpie permanent marker. Same thing, hold them where you're comfortable. Don't put an unnecessary amount of pressure on them. Just pull it back. You see we left red on the 1,000 grit wet dry sandpaper here. We're gonna open them up. And you're gonna see on this one, the bottom front does not make contact. And on that side, not too bad, but again, it's the bottom front as well. So what that means is, because a lot of people would use that inside point right there, that right there, as a way to either grab something, tweezing out an ingrown hair or a sliver or something, and it means you're not grabbing what you're trying to get because it's not making contact with one another. So we're gonna do some work with this on the 1,000 grit, and I'll get back here and I'll show you what the result. All I'm gonna really do is keep the same amount of pressure on that I held it at, and I'm just gonna work it back and forth. You don't really need to apply a lot of pressure. You want this to glide evenly. You don't wanna have a lot of abrupt kind of pressures at the beginnings or at the ends. You just wanna kinda let it go. Just let it do its thing. And you'll notice when it starts to get shiny on the paper, move to a coarser spot again. Because all you're doing is wearing the abrasive off here, and if you can feel the difference, if you rub your finger up here, and rub your finger where it was before, that's more rough, that's more smooth. So then put it back in where it wants to be rough again. And keep it going back and forth. Use the surface of that whole piece of paper just because it'll make your job easier when it comes to sanding this down. So let's see what we got. So you can see now, I'm pretty even on that side, and it looks pretty good on that side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually use a different color this time. I'm gonna paint this with the orange. All right, and you always set that aside to let it dry. Don't just paint it and grab the paper with it and expect it to work right. It's not gonna do that. You need to let it dry for a minute in the air. So then we'll move on to this one. Same thing. Do a little work with this. And we know that it was that inside corner up front here, right, that we wanted to work on. So you can adjust that as well. Put your thumb a little bit on this side and go a little heavy, you'll get the flex of that steel, that spring steel basically is what it is, and it'll kind of correct itself to put a little more pressure on that corner up top. So, you know, you kind of figure it out, feel it out. You can move it around in different directions because the abrasive doesn't know which way you're going. All right, and you can see that we're pretty even. We took all of that last of that red marker off that inside corner. We took the little red marker off of that inside corner, so we're going to paint it with our orange marker. And we'll do the same thing and set those aside. Now we can go back to the ones that we just painted a minute ago, because now they're dry. You can see that orange is a little bit darker. It's kind of like paint. It flashes, and now it's dry. So what we can do again is look for a relatively clean spot that you haven't really ground down at all now. Got a spot that's pretty good right there. Same procedure. The way you follow this to make it sharp is to make sure that you apply the same pressure throughout your processes. So get used to kind of feeling it and repeating it and making sure it's the same every time, and you'll end up with muscle memory and it'll feel the same all the time. So anyway, one quick drag. You can see that we pulled a lot of the red off right there. Oh, that's orange this time, excuse me. We'll see what happens. So as you can see, straight from tip to tip, if my light does not deceive me, I have no orange left on that. And it looks like I have a little bit of orange left on this side. So we're gonna do a little bit more work on this side. And very simply, till that orange disappears again. And you get the idea. You're just gonna repeat that process until you're satisfied. It really is just determining on how far you wanna go. You can make these things, you know, as sharp as you want them to be or as dull as you want them to be. So the way to test really is to just go ahead and see if you can grab something and pull. So, you know, whether it be a hair in your hand or something to that effect. And if that's good for you, then the last step you want to do is hold the two tips together like this. Make sure you're really flat. That angle right there, repeat it exactly on the paper and just do one pull. And if you zoom in on that and look, there's no seam in the center of that line. There's no deviation. They're both pretty straight. You know, I wouldn't call it a ride line because that's what shears are, but you get the idea. You know, I'm pretty much gripping evenly from front to back, top to bottom on that one now. So we'll do the same thing on this one. We'll see what happens now. That's been repainted with the orange. All right, you can see that we pulled the orange off. Should be hopefully on both sides. Yep, we got some on both sides. Let's see what we get. As you can see, that little front corner still right there has a touch left. And you can see again, that little front corner has a touch left. So these guys have like probably tweaked a little bit. So the next step you can do is take a larger pair. You can put these in like this. Put a little pressure there. And kind of pull those corners in. So I'm going from outside to inside in both directions here. So towards the center of the tweezers. And even though I recommend you let it dry in between just to show you, I'm only going to paint those two inside corners. Give it 1 second. And we'll do it that one pull test. And let's see if we fix that a little bit. Not perfect, but much better. So you get the idea. You get those two facets touching together, much better than it was before. Now you're going to get the results without, you know, compromising your skin or making a tweezer situation when you're pulling the thought out of a kid's foot or something more challenging and more difficult. So the same thing. Now that we're happy, if we say that we're happy with our surface, we'll take this. We'll make sure we're nice and even top to bottom. You're going to make sure that the angle of the blade Angle of those two is going to be straight from front to back on that. How's it looking there? We zoom in, it looks like one straight line, even though I curved it a little bit. And you can see we look pretty good. I would, if this, you know, if I was sitting around at home on a night, I would tweak that around. You can easily flatten that out and make it really super fine. Same on that right there. That's really nothing left. But that's how you're going to get the results. Instead of spending $25 on a pair of tweezers, is you can still have to set them up and make sure they're right. And that's pretty much how you do it at home.